Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Figure Friday. Today's figure, of course, is another Polynian in the line from Daibadi, and today's figure is Polynian FU01 Unison Reimu. Now, Reimu is a character from a series called Touhou. She's depicted as a shrine maiden, and in her game, she does battle with a witch. Touhou has a huge cult following, of which I never really got too into. I've played some of the games, but honestly, I'm not very good at them. Either way, if you're into bullet hell games or shoot-'em-ups, you'll love Touhou. And from what I understand, this is a pretty faithful adaptation. It's an interesting take on the character, of course, with a bit of the Polynian style spun to it. FU01, I would assume, stands for Figure Unison, which is mentioned somewhere else on the box, but we'll get into that in just a moment. But let's take a look at the box first. On this side of the box, she's holding her hips rather cutely, and on this side, she's presenting her staff towards the viewer. On the back, it's a bit low res, but it shows her with the usual accessory shots. Now, let's open the packaging. Of course, we have the usual windowed box, which is lovely, and I've actually taken some time to go over this text on the left. It mentions the Figure Unison line of Polynian figures. Figure Unison is a fancy way of saying that they're going to work with other franchises to take licensed characters and create Polynian versions of them. This is a really interesting concept, and I'm not so sure how many more there will be because this figure's been out for a while and they've yet to announce any other Figure Unison brand, but I am interested to see what they might do with the series. On the bottom here, we have some more information about her accessories. I thought it would give you more information about the character, but I guess they assume that you already know if you're a Touhou fan. But let's take off that film, and now we can see her and all of the accessories in the box. But let's open this thing. It comes with the paperwork talking about how you can care for the joints, and additionally it comes with this pack, which is a piece of paperwork instructing you on how to equip these fins, but we'll get into this more later. Then here's the figure itself with many accessories, and here's something new. They've included the Polynian arm base, which is really cool. That's a $12 value in there. Here's the figure itself, and in hand, it's very heavy. This thing is super solid, and the design overall is rather cute. She's just about 5.5 inches tall, which would make her a 1/12 scale like the many other characters. Funny enough, she's actually heavier than I think any other Polynian figure, and I'm assuming that's because of how much extra chunk she has. You can see that her sleeves themselves are the biggest piece on the figure, so that's where I'm attributing most of the weight to. But let's take a look at articulation. She has the standard up and down at the shoulder, a bit of a swivel, and of course you can roll that how you like. Her elbow isn't too limited by that large sleeve, you can get the in and out and the swivel, and the wrist is similar to the others where it can be rolled and up and down and swivel. Now in the back, she of course has that Polynian waist joint which allows her to move back, though unfortunately it doesn't allow her to crunch too much forward. Her legs aren't restricted too much by her skirt, they can go in and out and swivel, as well as her knees of course can bend in and out as usual and swivel at either side of the joint. And finally, her feet. They're a little limited by that big cuff there, but you can do what you need to. And of course, her head can go up and down, it can be swiveled, and she can roll it in all sorts of ways. Finally, her hair is actually attached, unlike the other figures, and of course, it is on a ball peg joint, so it can be swiveled, it can move up and down, and you can do what you need to there. Overall, she's a bit loose, so you would want to take her and put some super glue on the edges of her joints to tighten that up a bit. I do think out of box that's usually not too big of a problem, but I will say that it is a good majority of her most posable parts, so you're going to want to do that because this is a heavy character and it will fall apart. One thing I can say that I really like is the fact that they've used a lot of the soft PVC sort of vinyl-y feeling, very flexible pieces on this. Her bows, the pieces of her dress, it's all flexible, some of it a bit more hard than other parts, but it can flex where you need it to. And that's great because I've wanted that with all the other figures. Her tie, of course, is also flexible, and finally, the hair. Her little pigtails here, both are very, very flexible, which is such a nice feature. It's very much like the Figma hair, and I absolutely love that. Now, I talked about these earlier. These are the fins that sort of plug into the back of her, which would create sort of a ribbon on the back of her dress. Now, unfortunately, I'm not sure if you can tell here, but the sculpt on that peg there that would normally plug into that smaller female socket is incredibly poorly constructed. It's supposed to be a shape, but it's really just kind of a mush of plastic, and I can't get these things to plug in whatsoever, so I guess we'll ditch them for now. Additionally, she has these skirt pieces that plug into the sides of her, like the many other figures have pieces that plug into their waist, and this just adds a bit of volume to her dress. They are on hinge joints, which can go up and down, and of course swivel at either side of the peg. Now, another problem is that when normally you would take the waist apart, you can remove the piece in the back, which would allow you to get to the Robo pantsuit and everything else. But unfortunately, this one is completely attached and I can't remove it, which is creating a lot of problems. There's a lot of paint rub on this figure. The red got all over the stomach and I actually had to go wash it off. Now, this could be because of that softer plastic rubbing against the stomach, but I gotta say, it's a huge quality control problem and it really upset me. But let's look at her accessories. She has a pair of closed fists, open hands, a pair of jazz hands, a pair of trigger fingers which can hold accessories, a pair of peace signs, and a pair of the locked at the wrist peg hole hands which allow her to hold the many Polynian accessories. Now, of course, like the many other figures, you can turn her to the side, pop off this little pigtail here, remove the front of her hair, pop off the faceplate, attach another one, put her hair back on, and reattach her pigtail. She has a closed-eye smile, and of course a bit more of an intense face. Now, if you've ever seen a shrine maiden before, they're typically pictured with something called a gohei, which is this staff that she comes with. This accessory is rather nice. It sort of looks like a weapon, and I'm assuming that's what they were going for with this design. She is, of course, a combat character, so she can be posed with this, and it actually works pretty well. And that flexible piece of green plastic can be posed, so that's a nice addition. Now, on her sleeves, we have these removable plates, which are actually considered the yin-yang orbs. This is canon to the series, and they come with these little tendrils that you can attach. There's a male side that plugs into the disc itself, and the other side of it can be plugged into the area where you've removed it from the figure. These are flexible plastic, which is nice because they can be manipulated rather easily. And they won't break, so they actually look pretty good because the transparency allows them to appear as if they're floating. And this really opens up the figure. It gives her a much more dynamic position, and it really makes her look combat ready, which I do love. Design-wise, I really like this character. She can be posed rather cutely with her accessories, because she does come with quite a bit. But unfortunately, there's just a huge downside here. This figure was incredibly fragile. And I don't mean fragile in the way that she broke, I mean that she just continued to fall apart. This isn't the end-all be-all, because obviously you can do things to repair her. You could tighten up the joints by putting some super glue on either side of the connecting parts, which does work, but unfortunately it's just not enough of a solution for me. I feel like out of the box these things should work. They should be able to be posed and used as a figure. I'm not clapping these things together and making them fight each other on my desk, but the ability to just simply pose them and take pictures of them is incredibly difficult when they fall apart in this way. I can't tell you how many times her arms fell apart and fell off, or her skirt just came off the side of her dress. Her head was even rolling around a little bit loosely. The waist continued to fall apart similar to Yume, and unfortunately this really did affect my enjoyment of the figure. Normally I wouldn't mark it down too much for QC problems, but this time it's so bad that I have to. In addition to the weak connections on many of the parts, there was also a lot of paint errors on this figure as well. As you can see, there's a lot more detail on her, so they did have to do a little bit more work in painting her. Now, unfortunately, that meant that there was a lot more room for mistakes. This figure is littered with paint errors, and unfortunately, when you're getting up and close and taking detailed photos, they stick out like a sore thumb. Despite not being the biggest Touhou fan, I actually really did like Reimu in the end. I originally skipped this character because I just wasn't that interested, but later on I bought her because obviously I have the whole line. I collected her for collector's sake, and when I did open her, I was actually really satisfied with the way that she looked. I do like this figure, and I would gladly display it. I know enough about Touhou to say, yeah, that's Reimu from Touhou, and she just looks really cool as a robot character. But unfortunately, there's so many issues with this thing that I can't recommend a purchase of it. Originally, this figure would have cost you something like $60, but now it would seem that the market has dictated it to be somewhere around $90. I haven't seen a single one of these sell on eBay in the past month or two, but I can imagine that's what you're going to pay regardless of where you go. With that in mind, I really can't say that you should go buy her for this amount. The only thing that I can give her as a positive is the fact that she comes with the Polynian arm base, which is a $12 stand, though unfortunately the only reason it was included was because she would not pose with a standard hexagonal base. They included it out of necessity. There was no way they were going to be able to make this figure work without it, and that's just sad, but unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation. Normally, without QC errors, I would have given her something like an 8 as a score, but with all of the errors and all of the problems this figure presented me, I have to drop that score down to a 6. This is the lowest I've given any of the Polynian figures, and I really don't feel good about it, because I do like the character, I like the figure, it is nice, but it's simply impossible to play with and pose and really use as a figure. I hope that if they do more of the Unison figures, that they get a little bit more qualitative with the process. There was a lot of things about this figure that I liked. The inclusion of the softer plastics was a really nice touch. They included the Polynian arm base, which was another really nice touch. This figure felt more like a Figma when you really had it in hand, but unfortunately it just didn't have the quality of the Figma brand. I really hope that they do other characters from other franchises because I think they could do some really interesting stuff with it. But until they improve the quality of these figures in the Unison brand, I would have to say hold off. Only time will tell what happens to the Unison brand of Polynian, but I'm still interested to see them and I can't wait to do more of these reviews. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you did enjoy this. Tell me, are you a big Touhou fan? Who's your favorite character? Personally, I'm more of a Cyrano guy myself, mainly because of that bang and jam. But if you did like this video, please leave it a like, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and click a link on screen, it'll take you to another figure review. But until next Friday, have an awesome day and keep on collecting.